It is great to see everybody. Full table, always lovely. Simon didn't want to pay full price, so we're sitting in the bleachers. It's okay, Simon. It's okay. But if you want to sit at the table, we would smush. We would make room for you. It's, you know.
There's a seat over here, so.
Right.
Next to you, Harry, have a nice day.
There you go. You see that?
I thought he was gonna stay there.
We're gonna just take a few minutes and do seating arrangements, so you just hang on. It is, you know, it's wonderful to have everybody here. And to be able to teach Torah, you know, and most especially to be able to celebrate our church synagogue Sabbath exchange, which we've been doing for. I'm going to reveal something which I think is, you know, and by the way, nobody's listening, which is that this is the 30th year. I went back and, you know, we may have made a mistake counting, but next year we are going to do, it's in Hebrew, it's called Ki'ilu. It will be the 30th year next year. We'll just have two 30th years. So we will celebrate 30 in a big way. But every time we get together, celebration. The truth is, Wayne and Shayna Live are always with us in studying and learning and teaching us Torah. This week, Torah will be especially resonant for all of us. Share with me in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. I'm going to mute everybody online, not because I don't love you. I do, but because I don't want to hear cornflakes, so we'll do that. This week's Torah portion, as we mentioned last night, is the second in the book of Exodus. It is Vaera, and it is really the beginning. It's really the first act of a 2-act play. It's probably a 3-act play of trying to make the approach to Pharaoh to free the people of Israel from Egyptian servitude. The Koshi, not last night, I wanted to play on the idea of a heart. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about a heart full of grace. That's what we need. This is part of it, but the real deep dive Koshi is about what propels the mission or this sacred drama. And what propels it is somehow knowing Adonai, knowing Yud He Vav He, God. And so the Koshi is pretty clear. How does knowing Adonai help Moses, Pharaoh, Egypt, and all Israel come to understand who they are? And how does knowing Adonai empower our life purpose and frame our faith? That's the relevant Koshi. If Arnie were here, he would be asking that Koshi, you know, how is this relevant to us today? Right. By the way, Shayna is sitting close to Arnie, seated. It may be Deb. I'm not sure, one of those people. So you may have to play the role of Arnie. Right? So we're going to start. I'm going to start with Josh. I'm going to go right around. We're reading just a snippet of text, but you know this story. The beginning of and I could have quoted the beginning of the portion, the very first verse, which we'll go back to in the portion, said, which you don't have, but I'll just share with you. It says, "Vayidaber Elohim el Moshe," and God spoke to Moses, "Vayomer elav ani Adonai," and he said to him, "I am Adonai." And then the next verse is, "I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but did not make myself known to them by the name Yud He Vav He." I probably should have cited that and put it in here now that I think of it, but I told you. So there's something about knowing Adonai that moves us forward and enables us to find our life purpose. Josh, the end of chapter 6.
It is the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, "Bring forth the Israelites from the land of Egypt, troop by troop." It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to free the Israelites from the Egyptians. These are the same Moses and Aaron. For when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, and the Lord said to Moses, "I am the Lord. Speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I will tell you." Moses appealed to the Lord, saying, "See, I am of impeded speech. How then should Pharaoh heed me?"
Yeah, so again, I didn't look closely at the translation. I would have, every time you see the word Lord, I would have put Yud He Vav He or YHVH, standing for Adonai. God's name, because it keeps getting repeated. So this is the tone setter after the lineage of Moses and Aaron in chapter 6. You know, to let us know who Moses and Aaron are. And we see the sort of the setup, which is, you know, it's Adonai, and it's Moses and Aaron. And what's Moses' response? Hey, I can't do this. Thank you very much. Can't do this, right? He uses the same excuse. And then Josh, you're doing a great job. Keep going.
The Lord replied to or Adonai replied to Moses, see, I place you in the role of God to Pharaoh, with your brother Aaron as your prophet. You shall repeat all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh to let the Israelites depart from his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that I may multiply my signs and marvels in the land of Egypt. When Pharaoh does not heed you, I will lay my hand upon Egypt and deliver my ranks, my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with extraordinary chastisements. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, that I am Adonai. When I stretch out my hand over Egypt and break out the Israelites from their midst. This Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them, so they did. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 when they made their demand on Pharaoh.
So, so this is the beginning of, you know, of the exchange that will go on for 10 plagues worth. And, you know, and it sort of sets the tone, but it could be the purpose statement, not only of the plagues, but of what's going on at this moment, and the key to the liberation of the people. Clarence.
So 7-1,
7-1.
I place you in the role of God.
Yeah.
Just want the Hebrew, the role of God.
Yes, yes. So if you, primary, you know, coaches jump off the page at us here. Key question. So, in trying to understand what knowing Adonai is about, what it means, for Moses, for Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron, for Pharaoh, for Egypt and Israel,
I think
one.
this permits, because it's a distinction between, it allows us to understand Adonai, but it's not the statement about it. The role of God is different than Adonai.
Right, so
I'm
Clarence,
trying to find what is the word God here.
yeah, the word God is Elohim.
Okay, so basically Adonai is the name, and the role of Adonai is Elohim.
Okay, so Clarence is asking the question, on a shot level, because we're on a straight text level, what does it mean to be placed in the role of God to Pharaoh, and how is that distinct from God's name, Adonai? Great, Koshi. Notice I didn't answer it.
It's kind of, he's using the word notat, like notat to teka, however you pronounce it, but like he's saying, that, I'm putting you as God, and then he's putting his hand, the same word, on Egypt.
Right, so nitaticha, I place you, or I put you. So this is about, everybody has a place. So part of knowing Adonai, or part of coming to know Adonai, is playing a role, or playing your role. Maybe your destined role. Tom.
So 7-3. I don't know if it's Hebrew, but I will harden Pharaoh's heart. How does that, I mean,
Yeah.
it seems to me to be something that really speaks to what everything else happens, and it's, God is going to make all these bad things happen.
Yes, you are now playing the role of Bernie Axelrod, may his name be a blessing. Because as Jane knows, her father would come weekly. He sat where Steve is sitting right now. Isn't it wild how I can see people who aren't there? And he would say, but wait, what about free will? This is the ultimate what about free will question. Because as I said last night, if God hardens Pharaoh's heart, what was the problem? If God's in control, come on. That, by the way, is not our Koshi today. We're not really going to go there. But I would say to you, we'll dabble in it a little bit. Something about knowing Adonai is knowing your heart. So we'll come there. Virginia.
Yeah, I was wondering on verse 5.
Yeah.
Why is it important to Yehi that the Egyptians know that I am the Lord?
Yes.
Is it to convert everybody or what?
Yeah. Is this mass conversion? Right. Sun Myung Moon was that the guy right, the movie? So I don't think so. But part of the process is that the Egyptians have to know, in order for Egypt to Israel to earn their liberation, Egypt has to know Adonai, this God, Yud Hey Vav Hey. Right, what's the state of Egyptian religion at a time like this, 3,000 plus years ago? It's, there's a pantheon, there's a whole bunch of gods, right? And who's one of them, if not the God? Pharaoh.
Don't they have to, Moses and Aaron have to convince the Israelites that there's a God other than Pharaoh? There's a dual side of it.
Yes, so it's not just Egypt who has to know, it's Israel who has to know. Later, in another text, we'll get so that Israel will know, and of course, in chapter, I should say verse, right? No, it's before this. No, here it is. It's verse 9. Right after God makes the promises, Moses says the Israelites will not listen. They cannot, because their spirits are crushed by kotzer ruach and avodah kasha, by hard labor and either shortness of breath or spirits that are cut off. So if you have a cut off spirit, you can't know Adonai. Jane.
I'm just wondering, verse 7:1, when the God says, I place you in the role of God, isn't he basically saying that Moses is God's representative? He's speaking for God?
Yeah, so you're trying to answer the question because it's a little disturbing. It's like, you're sitting there on Broadway, and all of a sudden, just before the play's gonna start, it's like playing the role of God today, Moses. What is Moses the understudy? Is that what this means? Lynn.
Well, there also is a strategy in this, making the Egyptians understand who God is and his power. Because if you're planning an exodus, you want to make sure that you're not gonna have all these other people, hindering your retreat. And which could happen, but if they're all in awe of this power, they would stand back too and say, okay, the guys in charge that really got the power, gotta let these people go.
Right. If you have a whole peoplehood who are, who are enslaving you, they have to know. Yeah, there are chairs in the closet, right? Particularly where Debbie is sitting, right behind in the closet. So if you need a chair, or we will rent you a chair. Yeah, so I 100% Elaine. I'm gonna go Michael and then Harry. Michael.
I was thinking it might be useful to make a distinction between knowing God and knowing that it is God. And when you know that it is God, you're somehow accepting the role of something you call God. And that also is the context in which we are to understand you will play the part of God to Pharaoh, who himself plays the God. So this kind of idea of local gods or a hierarchy of gods, and then knowing God, which is an altogether different kind of thing. Knowing God, there are very few to whom it is granted to know God, and even then, only for a moment.
Right. So Michael is really focused right on the core of the Koshi. What's the core of the Koshi here? What does it mean to know God? As Josh read in verse 5, we get this whole setup, including Tom, the hard hardening. And then we get verse 5, V'yadu Mitzrayim ki ani Adonai. And then, of course, how, because I'm going to stretch out my hand over Egypt, and I'm going to take Israel out, and there'll be extraordinary chastisements, meaning lots of plagues and punishment. So somehow, it's about knowing Adonai, which isn't given to everybody in an intimate sense, but yet everybody's going to get to know Adonai. When we hear the word yada, right? What do we mean by yada? We mean an intimate knowing, right? And Adam knew his wife, and she gave birth. So knowing is knowing intimately, or knowing in a relational kind of way, where you truly understand each other, right, Harry?
So the first thing we learned from today's portion is that Biden is not too old.
That's right.
You know what? I was thinking the exact same thing.
But the second, I frankly had forgot or somehow hadn't focused on the fact that Aaron is the older brother.
Aaron is the big brother. That's right.
It's always Moses and Aaron. sometimes it's Aaron and Moses, once in a while, generally it's Moses. and-
Moses and Aaron, yeah.
And the age difference doesn't seem to play, whereas age is so important. But, and it's, you know, but they're not twins, at least.
No, they're not twins.
But, so I just, that just hit me that the text puts that in and puts the age.
Yeah, Harry's rooting to something and on a shot level. Something about knowing Adonai means knowing the people around you and the people closest to you.
So the other thing is based on that, I was actually curious about the roles of the two brothers. So it says, you know, you will speak, since Moses complained, I can't speak, it says you will, you will speak what I command you. And then says Aaron's gonna talk to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
So who's Moses talking to? Who's Moses gonna
He's
talk
gonna-
to?
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
maybe Israel, maybe talking to God.
And what does the text mean by not be? What's the role of the prophet? Because he's gonna be your not be, whatever exactly that means.
It sounds like we have two leading roles here, right? We have the prophet and we have the Elohim, whatever the Elohim is, Mike.
Jeff, I just want to say, getting back to the question of free will, I mean, just the idea of knowledge, you know, has to to me, has to imply free will, because knowledge in the absence of free will is utterly meaningless.
Yeah. So beautiful statement, which I love, right? Yeah, and we'll come back, in fact, because knowing Adonai and knowledge, by the way, Egypt has free will. Does Israel have free will when they're under the burden of slavery? Well, in a Viktor Frankl kind of sense, you can't control what people think. So maybe, Clarence.
So, one thing I didn't appreciate is that the word Adonai is used, and seen by, apparently, or a manifestation of, is understood by Egyptians, not just Jews, not just Israel.
Yes,
This
yes.
is before the Mount Sinai.
This is before Sinai.
So Adonai reveals an aspect of himself as Adonai.
Yeah.
To Israelites and non-Israelites.
Yes, yeah, so this is a revelation beyond, right? It's to the whole, it's for everybody
Not
to,
as Elohim, but as Adonai.
specifically as Adonai, which is crucial, Jake,
I guess I have a question.
yeah,
In verse 3 and 4 and 7,
yeah,
he hardens Pharaoh's heart. And then he says, when Pharaoh doesn't heed you, I will land. And I thought to myself, is this some setup? Because they're gonna heed him because of the hardening of the heart. And then he says, when I do all this, then I will lay my hand about Egypt. So I'm wondering if this God is doing this so he can justify doing what he does.
it's certainly a setup to a degree. But as I said last night, if you look at the first 5 plagues, in fact, God isn't part of the hardening of heart, it's just Pharaoh. Right, so it's Pharaoh, V'yichabed Paro et libo, Pharaoh hardens his heart, right? I got Lisa and then Zebby.
It's kind of a funny thing, like you wouldn't think that God would want to give someone else his own role to play. It's just so unusual and odd. It's funny.
Yes, so what is it, again, we're gonna go back to the same thing, the Clarence question, I think it was, which is, so what does it mean to be a god to Pharaoh? And is that what God means here, right, Zebby?
I don't understand, because there is no free will.
There is no free will because,
Just free.
right, verse 3, right?
Not free
And I
will.
will harden his heart, right?
What free will?
So is there free will, right? Of course, right? So we just go back, and by the way, not our Kikoshi, but just remember what the rabbi said in the Talmud, Hakol Tzafui V'harashut Nitronan. Everything is predetermined and free will is given. Take care, Shabbat Shalom. All right, last one, Lloyd, last one.
There's an argument to be made here that in using the expression of him, it's not saying that they're going to be gods, but rather there's going to be authority figures. Further into the book of Exodus, we've had the case of the Hebrew slave who says, I don't want to leave my master's house.
Yeah,
And he blotched at the gate of the city. And if they drill an awl and they hammer with an awl.
In his ear,
in
yeah,
his ear.
yeah,
The reference there is the same expression, you bring him to the Elohim.
yeah,
You go into this chapter here, and a few verses later, it refers to, I will pass judgment on Egypt.
yeah.
It is, though God is now appointing Moses to be judge and executioner, or at least Moses and Aaron to be judges, and I, God, will be the executioner.
So the distinction can be made, right? What does Elohim mean? It could be judge, right? Master, judge, whatever, right? Dave, real last one.
No, I was just gonna say, and I think this is inaccurate, but I think it was someone named Cinder, free will is given, we have no choice.
Right, which is, right, you're just flipping the phrase that I just said. Yes, so the same deal.
Jeffrey.
Yeah.
In Exodus 5, remember, when, basically Pharaoh said he would reject God's voice. In other words, who is God that I should obey him?
Yeah, and what Pharaoh actually says is, who is this God that I should know him? Ah, Vaera doesn't know God, right? Never met the guy. Okay,
But if he says the word God in that instance, is that Elohim?
you know what? We're gonna see it in a minute. We're gonna find out. I'm not gonna, so we're gonna go to the Remes, because it's time. How do we, Ellis has his hand up. Ellis, last one, you're transitioning us. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I don't think you can, in order to have any appreciation of free will, you have to separate the mind and the body.
Yes.
And it's only at that point can you understand free will in the metaphysical space.
Yes, because.
And the question of can a slave have free will? The answer is absolutely. They write about it, think about it.
Yeah. I made my allusion to Viktor Frankl, great psychiatrist who was in the camps, and he talked about how you survive the camps in his book, what's it called? Man's Search for Meaning. So Frankl says, in fact, we did have free will because they couldn't take away our ability to choose or how we responded, which was the key. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. So again, what does it mean to know Adonai? How does that help Moses, Pharaoh, Egypt, Israel come to know who they are and why they're here? We're in the beginning of the Remes. My friend Wayne is going to give us, this is the Rashi. So this is the beginning of God reminding Moses and Aaron of their mission.
It is enough that I am God, that my sending you will fulfill my mission. As it is previously stated, I am Adonai, thus I shall take you out of the burdens of Egypt.
Right, so when God makes the four promises at the beginning of the chapter, which become the 4 cups of wine in the Seder, by the way, God uses Adonai, right? The name that the people don't know him by or know her by yet. The truth is, Moses' response, I didn't sign up for this. Moses continually, right? So what does Moses say? Moses said, look, I am Aral Sfatayim. I'm of impeded speech. How can Pharaoh's not going to listen to me? It all plays out in knowing Adonai, right? So the Rashi under that, the 630.
This is the same statement as before, for Moses is still not convinced.
So the implication here is, what is this about? Moses has to know Adonai. Moses doesn't know Adonai. Moses is talking to God. God is somehow communicating to Moses, but does Moses even know Adonai? Because what is the root of Adonai? Yud Hey Vav Hey. Become. To be. Moses doesn't know what he can yet become.
Does he know his brother? He was in the palace. Does he know?
Yeah, no, he knows his brother. No, they corresponded. He clearly, I mean, midrashically, but he clearly knows where he comes from. That's what we believe. Mike.
Jeff, is there a distinction in Hebrew between knowledge and belief? Are there two different?
Oh, no, totally two different words.
Okay.
Totally two different words. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, belief, emunah, knowledge,
Okay.
dea. Yeah, totally different.
Okay.
What is, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What is this then? It says,
he's gotta know he's gotta believe, or he's gotta know what Adonai?
Excellent question. We're gonna answer it in about, in around 44 minutes.
So,
Yeah, just hang it. Correct.
6:26.
Yeah.
6:30.
Yeah,
Is an interesting analogy for how to establish knowledge, how to establish fact.
go ahead.
Because it says Aaron and Moses are in fact those specific Aaron and Moses who did these specific things. And furthermore, Moses is Moses, that Moses, this Moses, because at 30, he appealed to the Lord saying X. It's almost a rationale for how to establish facts.
It is. I love that. And I would even say, I would say that it gives us something even more. What, it just gave us a whole lineage, getting to Moses and Aaron. And now it's saying, so everybody will know, starring in this play, these are the guys.
And it's this
And here's
person
your
who's
director.
named Aaron, but it's this Aaron and this specific Moses.
Yeah.
Who did these specific things.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what, and these are these people that we're talking about.
right. This is not Moshe Greenbaum, right? Right? This is Moses, son of Amram. Yeah, so this is the guy. And as Josh just said, and by the way, the director is Ani Adonai.
And one way to know them is also because Moses was not certain.
Yes, yeah. And so, and they get their, they get their motivation in the scene. What's the motivation? The motivation is their roles. So they get to the setup, right? What was I watching? I don't miss award shows. I love them. The Golden Globes. And Martin Scorsese did not win for, what was that that long movie he made? Flatwood, yeah. So, which I wouldn't watch because it's too long. I couldn't do it. I have, but I'm sure it's amazing. But one of the actors in there was talking about why Martin Scorsese is a great director. And he said this, even when he's not there, you feel like he is. And I said, oh, God. So here we go.
What
So
Scorsese does to his actors sometimes is tell them, okay, now you're gonna be in charge of the scene. And you play the thing, and this one is gonna be your accomplice, and I'm gonna set it, and there's a great scene coming.
Right.
With all this action, and that's how the audience is gonna know.
So what does it mean?
Scorsese
So how do you get to knowing God? Well, you know your role. So what's the role? Look at, we're gonna go, who's up? Simon's up for us. So give us the Ibn Ezra, the Rashi, and the Targum Yonatan. So we'll start with the Ibn Ezra.
Elohim, a divine messenger. You will be like an angel messenger before Pharaoh.
Yeah, so Ibn Ezra, 11th century grammarian, is saying, you're gonna be like a god. You're gonna be a malach, right? A divine messenger. All right, maybe. The Rashi says,
In this verse, Elohim means a judge or ruler, not God, to chastise him through the plagues.
yeah, so this is, as Lloyd alluded, this is about judgment. It's about saying, listen, what you're doing is wrong. It's not moral. It doesn't fit this covenant code. Can't do it. Targum Yonatan, the Aramaic translation and commentary of Torah, says,
Elohim, as if to say, do not be afraid, you will be a master in his eyes, for Pharaoh will come to fear you.
yeah, so this is a relational role where you will in fact be his superior. So that's what it means, Elohim. You'll be like a master over him. All right. So all of these are trying to figure out, because Elohim generally in Torah does mean God. Strangely, Elohim could be understood as a plural word. Interesting. All right. So go ahead. So Harry, Robert Alter is trying to do a little bit more of a deep dive here. So what does it mean?
The reiteration of this old comparison may have problematic motivation. Pharaoh imagines himself as a god, but I have made you a god to Pharaoh.
So maybe this is, in Pharaoh's perspective, you'll be as a god, like a god. Because that's what Pharaoh does, right? Pharaoh doesn't, talk to, the peons. He doesn't talk, he only speaks with, those who are of exalted stature. So Moses has to have that same exalted stature to even enter into the conversation. All right. What does Dr. Sarna say? Oh, this is actually, Harry, read this too. This is good.
This passage is more than a repetition or variant of 4:16. He, Aaron, shall be to you a mouthpiece, not thee. Yes, and you shall be to him as a god. Here Moses is to fill the role of God in negotiations with Pharaoh, one who claimed divinity for himself. Moses' divinely endowed power and authority will expose the hollowness of Pharaoh's claim.
Which means, why do we make Moses an Elohim to Pharaoh? So Pharaoh will know what he's not.
Yes, but what is Moses?
Right, and so, which is why Alter says, this is a problematic framing, right? Because we don't want Moses to think, by the way, what is Moses called in Numbers 12? The humblest man on earth. So clearly it didn't go to his head, this God thing, right? He did not walk around, with God on the back of his, with a uniform. No. But somehow Moses had to feel like he was Elohim in this relationship. Gary.
Does that go for sort of everybody, that we can have our divine moments and then be?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's even more because it all is bound up, Gary, in the meaning of, the premise of the whole experience is, you don't know what Yud He Vav He is. You don't know what that Adonai, that 4-letter word, which we don't even know how to say anymore, means. Once you know that, you'll know who you are, and you'll know how to find your freedom, to be liberated somehow. Matthew Berkowitz is a wonderful rabbi, JTS faculty, and now lives in Israel, in Yemin Moshe. When I did a small trip in 2017 or 18 of like 18 people for second timers to Israel, we spent a morning with him. He's an artist. But I think he gets closest to it, to understanding, almost Rashi, but it's beautiful. Elaine.
How are we to comprehend that God has seemingly diminished the divine ego for the sake of Moses? First, God understands that Moses must be seen as an equal by Pharaoh, only when there will be a chance of Pharaoh's acquiescence. Pharaoh sees himself as a god, and so protocol dictates he must interact with a fellow god. Second, Moses' confidence is fragile at best. By appointing him as God to Pharaoh, God hopes to boost Moses' stature and self-image, and in so doing, make him a successful messenger. Finally, though Moses has been chosen as the leader, God seeks to teach Moses he cannot do it alone. His brother Aaron will be his right-hand leader. God seeks to teach Moses, and right-hand man. And in this respect, their relationship will resemble that of God and a prophet. Just as God needs a prophetic messenger to mediate the divine word, so too does Moses need Aaron.
So Rabbi Berkowitz is teaching us a few things about what it means to be Elohim in this scenario. First, Moses will be seen as an equal by Pharaoh, crucial. Second, that we need to boost Moses' stature because Moses' self-confidence is not all that high. So he has to be affirmed. And finally, Moses has to realize, even if you're Adonai, you don't do it alone. All these are wonderful because they'll play out in our own lives. So what is it to know Adonai for Moses? It's to know that you can speak truth to power. It's to know that you are somebody who has a message to share, and you in fact are sacred and important in your own right. And in doing that, you don't have to do it alone.
And you have to overcome something.
Right? We spent many of the portions, this portion and the previous portion, talking about what does it mean that Moses is aral sfatayim, of uncircumcised lips, right? Or circumcised lips. So, right, so what does that mean?
Stutterer.
He could be a stutterer. He could have a speech impediment, could have a cleft palate, you name it, right? So he doesn't talk so good, right? Is it an irony that God chooses a guy who doesn't talk so good to be the teacher of all Israel? Maybe not, right? The King's Speech, you ever see the King's Speech? I mean, it's, so it just echoes, right? So part of knowing, and it's beautiful, Josh, part of knowing Adonai is knowing you can be more. You can become. Of course, I'm playing on the root of the word, Adonai. Ellis.
I was wondering, does Pharaoh ever see Moses as his equal?
It's a great question. Think about this, Ellis, as you go down the plagues, once things get really bad in Egypt, doesn't matter. Frogs, locusts, hail, cattle disease. For moments, Pharaoh seems to, call in Moses and say, all right, I was wrong. You're in the right. Stop this thing. But as soon as the plague stops, Pharaoh has a change of heart. So is he really seeing Moses as an equal? I think he's seeing Moses as a tool and a vehicle for saving his own skin. I'm not sure how much he cares about his people. Clarence.
From a stage direction standpoint?
Yeah.
Only. If it's Aaron who's speaking to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
On Moses' behalf, it could indicate that Moses is higher than Pharaoh. If they're both in the same room.
Oh, because you mean Aaron's the communicator to Pharaoh and then.
Moses
Yeah.
is not communicating directly.
Yeah. As Harry said, so what does Moses do? Does he just stand there and look pretty? I mean, what's Moses' role?
It's almost like a sphinx.
Or
Yeah, maybe.
doesn't have to say anything.
Right.
And it's a power play.
Right, it's a power play, right? He sits just like Josh is sitting like this, right? Maybe. I think that Moses' presence means even more. We'll get there. So in order for Moses to become an Elohim to Pharaoh, right? Moses has to understand what Pharaoh is and what Pharaoh is not. Now you'd think that Moses would understand this because he grew up in the palace.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Shemot Rabbah, this is the rabbis. The rabbis are very visceral, right? Clarence, did you just read after you? Did you read this one? Shemot Rabbah is great.
Moses announced the first plague early one morning as the king of Egypt walked down by the river. This was his practice, for it enabled him to keep up the deception that he was a god, pretending to have no human needs. Thus would Pharaoh relieve himself by the Nile, when no one else was yet awake, alone and unobserved. So it was at this very moment Moses met him, calling out to Pharaoh, "Is there a God who has such physical need?" To which Pharaoh replied, "Really, Moses, I'm no God to you, but before the Egyptians I am. And there are such idiots, they believe. One can barely call them human, for they are truly masses."
Right, so why is this such a this is classic rabbinic midrash, right? From the compilation probably between the 4th and 6th century. So why is this so classic? What is this? And it's an Agadah, it's a legend, it's like a million of them. But why is this interaction so important? It's putting him down. Pharaoh, Moses says, "Oh, you need the toilet paper? Here you go." So, right. So what is it? What is this a moment of? This is a moment of, this is the Wizard of Oz. This is, who are you to question the great and powerful Oz? And then pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Come on. Right, it's deception, right? Michael and then Harlan.
I just find it so interesting that Ibn Ezra and Rashi cannot countenance that Elohim means God. They want to kind of get out of this. Elohim clearly does mean gods or God or gods, but they put something forward. Why do they put that forward? Because they can't countenance the idea that God can be embodied in a human being. Why not? Is this a reaction to Christianity?
Maybe I would say for Rashi, not so much. Maybe for Ibn Ezra, I would say it's more a response to their strict worry about the first commandment, right? This real concern.
Which century is Rashi?
Right, Rashi is 11th century French winemaker, right? Right, French winemaker. So could be Harlan.
As a remez, I'm thinking in terms of the role of Moses, I'm going back to the real name that God gave to Moses. And so Moses, this is like the living embodiment of This is Moses' Ehyeh moment. He is
Yeah.
becoming, and he's becoming this non-circumcised, this guy with non-circumcised lips. He's becoming, and this can only happen with a relationship with the divine, in terms of, I think, what the writer wants us to get out of, which the writer wants us to understand.
Yes, yeah, this is a becoming moment for Moses. And it's the Ehyeh moment. Now, Ehyeh, what did God say to Moses? What do I tell him your name is? And God didn't say Adonai. God said, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. I will be what I will be. Or that, as Rabbi Larry Kushner translates it, I am not yet what I am not yet. So God's name is Harley.
So what I would just add as another possible definition of Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh is that I am what I hope to become. I am becoming what I hope to be.
Beautiful. Yeah. Let's come back to that. We're gonna need that. What did you just say? So remind me again. I am becoming what I hope to be. Is that what you said? All right.
Yes.
Remember that. Write that down. Write that down. That's good. No.
Well, in this passage, what strikes me is the way Pharaoh speaks about his people. He calls them idiots and asses. And this is fascinating because that is not the way we want our leaders to feel about their people. And in describing him this way, it's such a pejorative description of the Pharaoh. Not only does he enslave the Israelites, but he treats his own people, thinks of his own people in such a diminished way. And I think that's makes a huge distinction then between this kind of leader and the kind of leader.
Yeah. So think about what it means to know Adonai for the Egyptians. Crucial. Yeah. Lisa and then Lloyd.
Maybe Moses becoming God is more like he's not just standing there, he's channeling God. It's like godliness, that he knows what God wants and what God what God wants him to do, and it's just kind of an automatic knowing.
Yeah, well, yeah, or it's an automatic. I love channeling. I think channeling is great, right? I think channeling is great. I love that. Michael asked before, did God hopes, right? So I think in this sense, yeah, God does hope, because God's in covenant with humankind. So God can't but hope. Good.
Can't help but discount Shema around. I mean, this is sort of like Superman comics once again, and a reversion of it. The Jews are down and out. Let's puff up how we wish to be seen, as opposed to what is the reality on the ground.
Right. Because on the ground, Pharaoh's in charge, right?
Pharaoh's in charge, and we go back to what, 4th century, 5th century, 6th century.
Yeah.
Ain't so hot.
Yeah. Things are not good.
So you're left with the text that says, "Oh yeah, that was like one of the few times that's recorded where we take on the man and we do well."
Right. Every midrash is a mirror of the moment, as Rabbi Norman Cohen would always teach us. So this is a mirror of what's going on with a people Israel, in the time of the rabbis, as the Talmud is codified, and a lot of these midrashim are existent, that Israel is not in charge of its own destiny, that Israel is, exiled and wandering. So it only makes sense to say, who's that guy who thinks he's in charge, who's ruling over us with an iron fist? Nothing. Virginia wrote something about reminding us that God doesn't have human feelings. That may be very true, but the only way we can understand Adonai is through our own human understanding, our own human perception, because we're not God. So we funnel it through. All right, Mitzi, and then I got to go back to the text.
Okay, I just wanted to note that I didn't know before come to these classes that the root of Adonai is become. And I find it interesting because you know, we've always, in Christianity, I've always just heard, I am what I am, or I am that I am. And now I'm hearing, I am what I will be, and what I'm really hearing is that God is saying, I am what I will be, just as I am what I've always been. Like, so I'm hearing God never changes.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting out of this, is that God never changes, is that he's always been what he is and what he always will be. And that's why he can say he is the great I am.
Right, God is Ani Adonai, but
Yeah.
what's significant that Harley pointed out, which is crucial, is that, as Rabbi Larry Kushner points out, that it functions in 3 tenses at the same time.
Yeah.
So, so that means timeless, eternal,
right,
present, never changing, always evolving. Is that a contradiction?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a future tense verb, right? Jane, quick, then I will go back to it.
I was just wondering now that you said that, I'm wondering if it's possible God never changes, but our perception of him might.
Yeah. So knowing Adonai, right? Then why does Adonai, enable us to fulfill our role? Is understanding that that we can become, right? So that as our perception of God changes, it's only because our place in the world changes, the role we play or the role we take on. Let's go. I don't know what Michael just said in the chat, but somebody can check it for me if it's a question. But let's go. We're going to, just because you brought it up and I knew you would. Part of understanding Pharaoh's hard heart, Tom. Wait, Tom, are you reading now? No, Dave's reading. Right. Part of it is to understand that too is a manifestation or an extension of knowing or not knowing Adonai. Please.
Just briefly, last week, wasn't Adonai used for the first time in the portion last week?
I wasn't used for the first time, but it was used in the story.
Evolution started at the beginning of the evolution of the name.
Yes.
And not Hashem name.
In that, right, but it was Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, that's the name, right?
And then later in the portion was Adonai.
Adonai, then it became Adonai. Yeah, later in the, 2 verses later.
So this is the name becoming.
Yes, this is the name evolving.
Okay. Although the hardening of the heart seems deterministic, events flow naturally from the aspirations and conflicts of the Pharaoh, who is seized with the delusion of self-sufficiency. He actually believes he is God. Pharaoh conducted himself in conformity with his own godless view, in keeping with his motives for ultimate power. Had he wished to turn and affirm Yahweh Vavhe, nothing stood in his way.
Right, so why is this too a response to knowing Adonai? If you don't know Adonai, you can think you're God. You can think, in fact, you are it. You are in charge. So what happens with Pharaoh? We know what happens. We know the story. Plagues hit. Next week, we'll study one of the plagues, my favorite plague, darkness. But the plagues hit and Pharaoh relents for a moment and then, says, because Pharaoh thinks he's in control. Even, in witness to the evidence to the contrary, Pharaoh still thinks he's in charge. And so he's willing to subject his people to great hardship, to use them as pawns. I'm not talking about any political ruler today. I'm thinking about it. I'm not saying it. But so Pharaoh doesn't care about the people. They're nothing. As he says, they're asses. Right? The masses, them asses, right? That's what my mind is sort of implicating. So Pharaoh, if he wanted to, could have acknowledged there's a greater power. Doesn't do it. And then this is just the kicker, as I mentioned in verse 5, V'yadu Mitzrayim ki ani Adonai. And I forget who did it, but somebody said, why is it so important that that Egypt know? It's not just Egypt, obviously, right? Zebedee, I'm sorry.
But that is important.
Go ahead.
Why doesn't it say
That Egypt and Israel.
Yeah, yeah. It only says Israel, in a previous chapter and in a later chapter, but it does say Israel.
That Israel knew that.
Yeah, it says the same thing.
God.
Yeah. But in this moment, with the setup, with the direction of the play as we're understanding it, right before it starts, it doesn't say Israel, it says Egypt. Because Egypt holds the reins here to Israel's future. They're becoming. Harold, go ahead. This is the eighth kind.
This is the ultimate response to Pharaoh's contemptuous declaration, I do not know Adonai. In time, as a result of these events, the entire world will come to know him.
Right, so the goal of this play is everybody's gonna know Adonai. It's gonna be the name on everyone's lips. All right, as we transition to the Drash Harley question or comment.
No, so before we get to the Drash, unpacking Egypt, Mitzrayim, from a Remez point of view,
yeah,
you know, I just jotted down Mitzrayim. It's not just Pharaoh, but it's everyone in Egypt, because they are living in what in Hebrew could be described as the land of double narrowness. I guess the Egyptians and in Pharaoh are suffering, you know, from the delusion. They don't recognize the narrowness in which they're living.
Yes, beautiful. What is it not to know Adonai? Is to feel constricted. Here's the irony, right? Here's the irony that the Israelites suffer from Chevrah, you know, from a shortness of breath or constriction of spirit, and so do the Egyptians, right? So do the Egyptians. Shane.
I love that because I'm sitting here seeing how stuck Egypt is. Like Pharaoh is stuck. He will never be bigger than himself. He's not becoming anything.
Yeah.
Whereas Israel and everyone that's coming out with them has all the potential to evolve and grow and identify as becoming.
Yes. Yeah. So knowing Adonai is knowing you can be more. Not knowing Adonai is thinking this is the only reality that can ever exist. I cannot grow or reach beyond this. It's evidence.
I look to anything.
You.
The only place it says.
Yeah.
That they know that he's God.
Yeah.
Right there. Not any place above the Jews.
No. In this portion, yes. In this portion,
Anywhere.
No.
No.
I can't do it now, so I don't want to spend time. But I know it's mentioned once before.
Email.
I will email you. Yeah, I'll find it. I can't find it right now, but I will find it.
The whole act starts with, well.
No, it does, but it doesn't.
But
it doesn't say in this portion. In this portion, for sure. I think Zev is right. The setup to the play is Egypt has to know, right?
So I think I might be jumping ahead, but to bring it into a little more contemporary times, I think you have to develop a dream first to make this happen. And I think that you see this time in, time out, somebody comes forward and says, I have a dream, I have this belief that this could happen. And I think that God is telling Moses, you could have that dream. And you just hear this time in and time out through history.
Yeah, so in a way, what Harley said before is very similar to that, which is, what was the phrasing, Harley, with the hope?
I am what I hope to become.
I am becoming what I hope to be, or I am what I hope to be. So hope is dream. So it's this, so aligned with that, right? So I see the reality and I know that I can be something more and the world can be something different.
So I want to go back to Moses' role, where it says Aaron's going to talk to Pharaoh and says you're going to speak, but it doesn't say to whom. The text doesn't say to whom. And to me, the subtext of this is that the real audience is the people of Israel. Because this whole scene of Pharaoh and letting my people go and hardening heart, I mean, God knows all this is going to happen God said it before to Abraham.
Yes.
You know, you're gonna go down, you'll be there for
Yeah.
400 years.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be free.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you very much, I'll wait, right? But, so that's all been set out in the text. What we don't know is what the children of Israel are gonna do. Are they gonna go along? What are they gonna be?
Right.
And maybe that's who's becoming. And the subtext when the three presidents testified before Congress, the real audience was not Elaine Stefanik. It was a much wider audience.
Yeah.
And it was the audience of their donors, it was the general public.
Yeah.
And I don't think Pharaoh in the end is the important audience. I think that's what that little piece of Torah is saying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about a much wider audience. So, I don't want.
One final thing,
Yeah.
remember that the text tells us there was never anyone like Moses.
Yeah.
So I think a little care was saying, oh, we can be just like Moses. I don't think so, actually. I think the text is saying there is never been and never will be, because there's that tension, was he God?
Right. So there's something divine, but Harold Kushner, go to the drash, right? Maybe Michael and Virginia would split this up if they're willing to read. That this is about Harold Kushner, the great rabbi of Temple Israel in Massachusetts, Alav Shalom, this past year. So he's trying to help us understand what is it for Egypt to know and for Israel to know, and why does the world have to know? Because this is the distinction between religion and magic, or the new Israelite religion, in a way that everybody must know. Go ahead, either Michael or Virginia, whoever wants to read first.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, the Harold Kushner, the confrontation, Virginia.
Okay, Virginia.
Oh, okay. The confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh is more than a confrontation between two strong-willed men, more than a showdown between two ways of life. The Egyptian commitment to a society based on slavery and the Israelites' yearning for freedom. It is a confrontation between two kinds of religion, two ways of understanding the human relationship to God. A century ago, Sir James Fraser offered a classic definition of the distinction between religion and magic. Religion, he taught, was serving God. Magic was using God. When Moses turns the water of the Nile into blood, he's obeying God's command. When Pharaoh's magicians turn water into blood, they're manipulating the gods to obey their commands. The purpose of the 10 plagues was to demonstrate God's power over humanity. The purpose of the magical acts performed by Pharaoh's courtiers was to demonstrate the power of clever men over the gods. We know the outcome of the confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh. God's will prevailed. The Israelites went free. And Pharaoh, who began to say, I don't know Abraham, why should I hit him? Had to give in. But the confrontation between two understandings of religion continue to this day.
Go ahead, Michael.
Many superstitions are rooted in the belief that there are forces more powerful than God, forces which God himself is obliged to obey. If we know how to pronounce the right spells, perform the right rituals, we can compel God to do our will. More significantly, when people assume because they've been ethically upright or ritually observant, God owes them good health and good fortune, their understanding of what it means to be religious veering dangerously in the direction of magic. A colleague of mine, prompted by Deuteronomy 17 that God cannot be bribed, suggests that many religious people operate on the assumption that God can. He recalls being invited to do the wedding of a prominent congregant in their backyard. About an hour before the ceremony, dark clouds gathered overhead. The mother of the bride took a $20 bill, gave it to her husband and told him, put this in the pushka, that it shouldn't rain. 45 minutes later, as the guests were being seated, the clouds were still threatening. The bride's mother handed her husband a 50 for the pushka. As it turned out, the wedding went off without a drop of rain. I'm sure the woman believes it was her tzedakah and will continue to until someone is seriously ill, when she will give $1,000 to charity and be very upset when God changes the rules on her. I believe that the essential feature of Yahweh in Torah, that which distinguishes Israel's God from the pagan gods, is that he takes humanity seriously enough to enter into a covenant with us, to expect us to uphold our share of the agreement by meeting his expectations. And we respond to that summons because at some level, we want to be taken seriously as moral beings. We want to be summoned to be fully, authentically human. A religion which serves only us, never making demands of us, cheats us. More. I believe God works miracles in people's lives, but I don't believe we have the right or the power to summon up a miracle at will to suit our needs. If sick people recovered every time we prayed on their behalf or gave charity, life might be more pleasant, but that would presuppose a world in which we would be God and God would be our servant. We cannot command a miracle. When one happens, we can only bow our heads at the wonder of it. Pharaoh's courtiers worked miracles to show they had power over the gods. As a result, when they reached the limits of their power, they had nowhere else to turn. Moses worked miracles as a manifestation of God's power. As a result, when he reached the limits of his power, he could turn to God.
So this is a life perspective that the whole world must come to know, right? Ani Adonai. What does it mean to be Adonai? It means to know that we are playing the role, not of God necessarily, but we are playing the role of God's agents in the world. So Krishna is telling us knowing Adonai means understanding we are not in charge. There is some power of becoming that we can access or that we're part of. And in fact, understanding that we can be more, that the world can be better, different, is part of knowing Adonai. And that we can't manipulate it to our, abilities, right? Elizabeth has her hand up or no?
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Um,
you there?
yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah, okay. I keep thinking about how God needs us, because because of the covenant, God can't be God unless we do our part. And God keeps trying to remind us of that we have a role to play.
Yes. Yes.
So.
Yeah, and in fact, I thought that was what Harry was going to say. Because to me, one of the great lesson here is that Moses is going to approach and maybe talk, but really the prophet's going to be Aaron. Is even God needs humankind to share the word, to spread the vision, to dream, to hope,
To be successful.
to be
As
successful.
the kind of God wants to be.
Right,
In
right.
a very Capra-esque, Clarence gets his wings, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Peter Bailey that had, Peter, right?
Wonderful life. Yeah, yeah.
That
Peter Bailey,
has to fulfill a version of his own destiny that he
My
didn't know.
top 5 movies in the world ever.
And I think the reflection of God's image also,
Yeah.
the fact of the tri-tenses in Hebrew is that humankind must come to understand that there is a version of each of us that ever was, that is becoming,
Yeah.
and that is out there yet
Yeah.
playing out
Yeah.
in a future.
Yeah, and Heschel said we are God's stake in human history. Right? So what does that mean? Stephen Robbins, right? And then we're gonna go to the Reverend Dr. King. Stephen Robbins, why don't we have the sharp kids do this? All right? So Tom, you start, and then in the middle, your mom can take over.
Moses does not understand his role in this redemption story. It is not Pharaoh alone whom he must convince. The people of Israel who must be taught that all Egyptian deities are lifeless stones and that their slavery is political oppression, not Pharaoh's divine will. The slaves serve as a device to teach the Pharaoh that Pharaoh is only a man willing to sacrifice anything to keep up the charade of his own divinity. Moses must become a god to dethrone a god. Now we understand the enormity of Moses' role in this strange verse. God tells Moses that he must appear as God instead of Pharaoh. Even replace Pharaoh in that role. In their poverty of spirit, the slaves could never understand the invisible God of Ruach who called them. They could not hear Moses, for they suffered from Kotzer Ruach. The word Katsar, in this case, means to cut off, spiritually cut off from God. They could not recognize the ancient name of God as Moses called it. Their physical suffering only validated the power of Egypt's deities. Their spirits were nowhere to be seen.
All right, Tara.
They had become subservient to the power of the physical world, so blinded by the shining splendor of Pharaoh that they could not see the spiritual deception beneath the surface. Only the contest laid out between Moses and Pharaoh could raise them to a new level of spiritual growth. Moses had to win by Egyptian rules so that the slaves would realize the truth on their own. Otherwise, God would bring no liberation, only a replacement of one idol for another. It was the slaves' self-realization that God required. Adonai could become their God only if they needed it and willed it. Their liberation was not just freedom of the body, but freedom of spirit. It is not the miracle of the plagues that is important, but the nature of divine power that's redefined. Not by my might and not by power, but by my spirit. Moses teaches us of a God who supports and empowers us to act as the expression of the divine in the world. As Moses was transformed to enact the image of God, so must each of us stand forth, reflecting the image in our souls to teach the truth of God's presence. Our freedom of spiritual power, used in the service of God, is the awareness that liberates us all.
So why is that so crucial? Right, it's exactly what Kushner said. Adonai takes humanity seriously enough to enter into a covenant with us. We want to be taken seriously as moral agents. And Robin says, God only becomes Adonai when we will it, or when we need it enough. Meaning, it's a covenantal response to a God who's always there. But we have to enter into that covenant, into relationship, into responsibility, into the belief that we in fact have the ability to make life more.
So this ties to our annual learning, to be a blessing.
Yes.
To act as the expression of the divine. So to be a blessing is that we bless God in our bracha.
Yeah.
We praise God for the gifts that he gives us.
Yeah.
But one of them is that we understand ourselves to be in the image of God.
Yes.
And so perhaps to be a blessing might be to try to act in a way aligned with that. And as a result, be a gift unto others as God is by analogy to us.
Yeah.
And perhaps to be praised in that conflict.
Yes. Yes. So how do we reflect the image is really the question. In a way, it's by understanding God's name as it informs our name, our purpose, our place, right? Bringing blessing by being a blessing, right? Todd, did you be hit up? I wanna.
Yeah, I just had a question.
Yep.
In the third paragraph on the bottom, it says Moses had to win by Egyptian rules, and then otherwise it would be a replacement of one idol for another. But it seems to me, if we win by Egyptian rules, it is a replacement of one idol for another.
I love that. I love that. Right. So right. I guess what it is that Moses had to play, the game, because Pharaoh's game is, oh, you want to make the staff snakes? Yeah, we can do that. That's like number 14 in the book. So eventually it becomes clear, wait a minute, this God isn't playing by our rule book. There's stuff that goes way beyond our ability. Our magicians can't duplicate this stuff, right? Clearly, this is some other God from a whole different league. So I think that God becomes more, but I do think, I think that it's sort of saying, all right, you want to play the game? I'm ready to play your game. So I think that's where, he's coming from. The thing not to miss here, and I'm gonna call on Philip, is God becomes Adonai when we understand that our actions in the world impact God's name. Right? Philip, and then we're gonna transition. I'm gonna call on Mitzi and Judy. I think, Judy, you still there? Judy Dichter and Mitzi to read the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
No, really, really, Rabbi, I was just wanting to make sure I'd heard that right. Your statement, God only becomes Adonai when we will it. And I think we could.
I'm quoting Rabbi Stephen Robbins.
Yeah, so I think we could probably spend years just meditating on that.
We could, but you know what? Here's the great thing. I have an example of it right here. From the Strength to Love, which is a book that the Reverend Dr. King wrote and was published posthumously. Go ahead, Mitzi, why don't you start us, and then Judy, you can finish it up.
Okay, where do you want me to read to? Like to heart? To
I don't know.
through the second? Okay.
How about if you go to We're in Earnest, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph.
Okay. God is able to conquer the evils of history. His control is never usurped. If at times we despair because of the relatively slow progress in ending racial discrimination, let us lift our hearts in affirmation that God is able. In our sometimes difficult, lonesome walk up freedom's road, we do not walk alone. God walks with us. He has placed within the very structure of the universe certain absolute moral laws. We cannot break them. If we disregard or disobey them, they will eventually break us.
As they did Pharaoh. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to interrupt, but I couldn't resist.
At times we feel we do not need God. There is so much frustration in the world because we have relied on gods rather than God. We have genuflected before the God of science, only to find that it has given us the atomic bomb, producing fears and anxieties that science can never mitigate. We have worshiped the God of pleasure, only to discover that thrills play out and sensations are short-lived. We have bowed before the God of money, only to learn there are such things as love and friendship that money cannot buy. These transitory gods are not able to save us or bring happiness to the human heart. Only God is able. It is faith in God we must rediscover, for we know God's name. With this faith, we can transform desolate valleys into sunlit paths of joy and bring new light into the darkest caverns of pessimism. It was when I became part of the leadership of the Montgomery bus protest that I was confronted with the greatest trials of my life. Almost immediately after the protest, we began to receive threatening telephone calls and letters in our home. At first, I took them in stride, but as the weeks passed and they persisted, I realized that many of these threats were in earnest.
Judy.
After a particularly strenuous day, I settled into bed at a late hour. My wife had already fallen asleep, and I was about to doze off when the telephone rang. An angry voice said, "Listen, nigger, we listened all you want. We've taken all we want from you. Before next week, you'll be sorry you ever came to Montgomery." I hung up. I could not sleep. It seemed that all of my fears had come down to me at once. I got out of bed and finally went to the kitchen to heat a pot of coffee. I was ready to give up. I tried to think of a way to move out of the picture without appearing to be a coward. In this state of exhaustion, with my courage almost gone, I decided to take my problem to God. my head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud. The words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here standing, taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I am afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I can't face it alone. At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I never had before. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, thank you, stand up for righteousness, stand up for truth. God will forever be at your side. Almost at once, my fears began to pass. I was ready to face anything. 3 nights later, our home was bombed. Strangely enough, I accepted the word of the bombing calmly. My experience with God had given me a new strength and trust. I knew that God was able to give us the interior resources to face the storms of life. Let this affirmation be our ringing cry. It will give us the courage to face the uncertainty of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue to stride toward freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a great benign power in the universe whose name is God. And he is able to make a way out of no way, able to transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. This is our hope for becoming better humans. This is our mandate for seeking to make a better world.
You want a definition of what it means to become? What Adonai means? What Yud Hey Vav Hey, even what Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh Parli means? It's this. It's to be in the depth of despair, to face fear. Moses must have been scared shitless. I mean, come on. Moses must have been beyond himself, but and so, right, so the ability to know the reality is daunting. And still to have a faith that it can be different, you can transcend it, and that you are a part of it. You have a role to play. Dave.
I have a question. Is this way in the third last line is capitalized? Is that?
Yeah. I didn't capitalize that. And look what he talks about. God, only God is able, for we know God's name.
And this is the attitude of the 3 Hebrew boys, but Nebuchadnezzar, because they said, we know our God is able.
Right.
But their attitude was, if he doesn't do it, we still are not going to matter.
That's it, right? God is able, even if you're not seeing God's presence in the world, even if life is burdensome, right?
I think of also Nelson Mandela, how many years in prison bond.
Yeah, 20, was it 29?
27.
27, I mean, crazy.
And they couldn't break.
Yeah, right? It's about, right, break his spirit, right? The Hebrew spirits in the gut. Horrible.
It's kind of one of the, this is like, at this moment, this is like a bookend, which started in the Garden of Eden when it was Adam and Eve who named all the animals. And this is now a time where the people are able to give a name to the divine, which is unknown and really unknowable. But it's our ability to give this name to that which is greater than us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. And of course it gives us, a purpose, because somehow, as it'll say, we share a name, or we share in the name, right? So you couldn't pick a better parsha for remembering the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And to me, this is the ultimate moment. It's about, because what is he worried about as opposed to Pharaoh? He's worried about the people he serves. He's worried about the people who are in this mission. and he's worried that he will not be up to the task. That's what a leader is, right? That's what, and maybe that's what Moses was too, because what did Moses do? 3 times, maybe 4, Moses says, pick someone else. I can't do this. Moses doesn't believe, right? And and what convinces Moses? Is it God's name? Is it that his brother is with him? Is it he can do all these magic tricks? I think it's something more.
Brother, I have a question. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna channel Arnie here.
Arnie.
So how do we channel God in this day and age?
Yeah.
What do we do? I mean, is it just attending, coming to the synagogue? Is it, how do we?
God, I hope not. Oh my God. That would be awful. That'd be awful, right? Right? So I think, so the question was, right, not posting a Brooklyn accent at all. Right, whoops, sorry. So that, how do we channel God? How do we understand? I think we channel God by, I quote the Reverend Dr. King. When low hovering clouds and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we remember that there's a power in the universe whose name is God, and God is able to make a way out of no way, to transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. So I think, is it partly hope? It's right. It's understanding God's name, which we make real. Partly, what do we say God's name is?
I am what I hope to become.
I am what I hope to become, which means, I love it, by the way, that's good. Because it means I already have within me the ability to make the world that place that it has to be.
I think there's something else going on here. Remember, he is a fugitive. He committed crime. He's a flawed person. And in a way, this is a further model of so many of the heroes in the Torah.
Yes.
They are flawed people that transcend whatever the flaws are.
All of them.
And become something more.
All of them.
And I think that's part of what this narrative is about as well.
Yes, with all of our foibles, right, Steve?
I think it's something else for us on a day-to-day level.
Yeah.
I think it's more of, look, there's no way I'm gonna change the United States of America, maybe, but I doubt it. But if we could pick out one person, 2 people, just identifying them, just knowing that they need some kind of help on a most basic level.
Yeah.
And reaching out to them, not to make them feel like they're less than, that they're slaves. But
Beautiful.
just to try to elevate them.
Yeah, liberation begins.
And you know what, just by doing that. It's like throwing a pebble into a water.
Yeah, but you don't have to change the world here, but if you can change one life.
And then just that person.
Right, save a single life.
And it plays forward.
Yeah.
Would there be a God if there was no evil?
Would there be a God if there was no evil? Yeah, wouldn't that be a great question to be able to answer? Yeah. Right. So so you're answering, what does it mean that God's name is somehow becoming? That the world is not what it's supposed to be. Right? We are, and Harley said it, we're banished from the garden. And
It's gonna be an invention. You had to invent God because it was evil.
Right.
That's
So
how I see it.
right. Which
The other things, the Holocaust, whatever.
Right.
There had to be something.
So God is our response to trying to transcend. Yeah, I wouldn't say no. I think God is more, but I would say no. Did somebody have their hand up online and I saw it, I just missed it. Was it Virginia? Who had their hand online?
Yeah, it was me. And I was just wondering if we are not what we hope to become. I'm taking Harley's phrase here. That's our idea of God, that we are what we hope to become. We hope to become something much more attuned to that other presence.
Yeah, and I would even say in facing evil, but yeah, that's so right. So we are challenged with a God whose name is not yet. Right? Gary, last comment that I'm gonna close.
It seems confusing to me that I could see for me, that's a wonderful definition. I am who I hope to become.
Yeah.
How do we know that God wants to become something else? How do we know anything other than I am who I am?
Right. So I think the great thing is it's multiple tenses all at the same time. Because if God is beyond time, then the Holy One doesn't have to, there's no time in God's being. So at the very same moment, God is eternally present and ever evolving. Okay, Mitzi, really last comment.
I like Mitzi's comment.
Just unmute Mitzi, you gotta unmute.
Sorry about that. So we've heard that we become what we worship, right? I don't know if everybody's heard that, but I've always heard that we become what we worship.
Yes.
And, you know, there is scripture, there's a psalm that says pretty much exactly that, because it's talking about people who worship their gods and how they become just like them. And so it makes sense to have a connection between God being Elohim, with that root being to become, and our becoming. Because if that's true, that we become what we worship, you know, we become more like God.
If we are in covenant with God, the words of the prophets ring out here. Because what's at stake here? What's at stake is what the prophet said. You are my witnesses, and I am the eternal. I am Adonai. And what do the rabbis say? If you are my witnesses, I am God. I am Adonai. If you are not my witnesses, I am, as it were, not God. God, who else needs us to accept this mission, right, of becoming? The Holy One. God needs us to be manifest in the world. We have just wasted a perfectly good hour and a half. It's wonderful to see everybody. If you're not doing anything tomorrow, come to LT, Straight Gate, and LT. If you fly now, Virginia and Michael, you can make it from Paris. It is wonderful to see everybody. We're gonna have a minion someplace in the library. Don't miss it. And to everybody, a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
Thank you, guys.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you, Rabbi.
Sorry, you can't be there, would love to.